Okay, it's time to get started. Ken, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hey, thanks for coming to our part two of our Glueware Worldwide Services webinar series here. Mike and I are here again to share some information, to collaborate and let you guys know how we work together in a 1-2 punch. So we're going to go through this webinar. Mike will lead it. I'll jump back in later. It is being recorded, so there'll be copies of it out there for you guys. But thanks for coming, and let's get started, Mike. We'll go from there.
Great. Thanks, Ken. So just to recap from an agenda standpoint of the Glueware content, we're going to do a quick recap from part one, just introduce the Glueware system and so you can understand our approach to network automation and the benefits you gain. And then in the live demo, it's going to be completely new content from part one. We're going to highlight our config management software we call config modeling, as well as our drift and audit application. So we're going to jump into those and we'll do some fun live demos to see the product in action here. So as a quick introduction, and I'm hoping my Zoom float over is not taking up my screen. As a quick introduction to Glueware, Glueware is a pure software layer that brings intelligent network automation to your existing network. So we kind of like to highlight that we automate the brownfield or the existing network, and that networks that's made up of multiple vendors, multiple domains like your LAN and campus, your WAN, your data center, and even new API-based architectures like your SD-WAN domain or your public cloud. Glueware provides deep intent-based capabilities. And intent-based is kind of a marketing term, but there is some meaning behind it. And that with Glueware, you are specifying the intended state of the network when it comes to configuration. The Glueware automation and orchestration engine will read the current state, compare it to the desired state, make the required changes in a declarative manner, and ensure that each device is in the desired state and validate it. And it provides a continuous validation cycle. So that's what we mean by intent-based. And with the deep insight and action, you're going to see some of that today with our technologies like Drift and Audit to be able to audit down to very deep granular levels of the configuration and parameters on your network and be able to monitor for change. And so Glueware is a product used to automate, as I said, the brownfield existing networks, but it's really across the lifecycle management from day zero, net new deployments with things like zero touch provisioning, all the way through, day N changes where you're updating Syslog and updating QoS policies and many other things. So it really is used for like the continuous management of the network from a configuration policy, audit, and monitoring standpoint. So we're going to get into those things that you're going to see with Glueware. At a very high level, what you see with Glueware, and for fun, maybe I'll annotate a little bit, is that the Glueware product is here in this middle box. It is the intelligent orchestration engine, which again, Glueware is a pure software solution that is delivered via as SaaS or can be deployed on-prem. So our kind of SaaS only offering is called Glueware Pro. Glueware Pro runs from Amazon Web Services and just requires a lightweight, secure gateway on-prem, and then all of the Glueware content and software runs from Amazon, and you manage your network from there. With Glueware Enterprise, we kind of say it your way because it could run in your cloud, in a public cloud. Most folks install on-prem as one or more virtual machines, and it is highly scalable because it is leveraging the Glueware zone engines. The zone engines enable the distributed power of Glueware throughout your network. So if you're a global organization and you have a network or a data center in Europe and in EMEA and China, you could have Glueware zone engine servers running and handling essentially the workloads in a distributed manner. So Glueware is highly distributed in that fact. So the intelligent orchestration engine is where we process everything as a data model. And this is quite powerful because when you think of your existing network and you have a lot of, let's say, legacy CLI-based devices, Glueware has an adapter layer to speak the native CLI and semantics to those vendor operating systems like Cisco iOS or Juniper Junos. and that when we issue the CLI commands to read information off those devices, like the configuration, we ingest it and we wrap that in data modeling. We use JSON-based data modeling, so everything is treated programmatic within Glueware. And then when we then need to write down to the network layer, we take a data model, but then we return it back to the native CLI in semantic when we write down to the network layer. So this flexibility in this adapter layer allows us to actually automate over 30 different network operating systems across routers and switches and load balancers and WAN optimizers, wireless LAN controllers. We've been putting a lot of focus in on API endpoint-based automation. So things like Cisco's SD-WAN through the Viptela acquisition, where we automate vManage through an API, or a Cisco Meraki, which is for small office, home office, or even smaller deployments that's cloud managed. We interface with the Meraki cloud instance via API, as well as the public clouds like Amazon and Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud. We actually have the Terraform vendor adapter that enables us to automate those public clouds. So that's kind of the intellectual property of Glueware in terms of orchestration engine and what we automate. The way we make it easy for you to automate will be a bit of a focus today is this layer here, which is the applications that we've built on top of our orchestration engine. So similar to your iPhone or your Android, you have a phone and it has an operating system, and then you load the apps you want on it for specific purposes like email and chat and other things. Glueware has a suite of applications that leverage the common orchestration engine to do things like perform device management, inventory, audits, drift, operating system upgrades, config management, and more. So that's what we're really going to focus on. And then when you think about automation, usually there's like kind of three categories. One is the build your own, which is where you're trying to do scripting or try to use Ansible in the playbooks. And those can be effective, but you're curating it yourself, and they're all kind of independent scripts that maybe operate differently. And you're kind of trying to get all that working in addition to the task at hand, which is some change or some data you want to extract from your network. The second is the vendor and or certain other automation approaches, which are deterministic in that they are preconceived automation strategies, meaning you have to do it their way. Another term for it is being prescriptive. So you're using Juniper Contrail and you want to deploy EVPN, you have to do it their way, right? And you have to do it greenfield, which means from scratch. When you're initially deploying your EVPN fabric, you have to do it that way. So a lot of the vendor automation approaches will be prescriptive. Glueware is incredibly flexible. We enable you to bring your own procedure and policy and configuration. So with that kind of bring your own strategy, we enable you to bring any config policy, any design, even that example of a Juniper EVPN VXLAN. We have customer success around automating an existing Juniper EVPN EVPN VXLAN based fabric. So that you're going to see quite a bit in our config modeling technology, how we enable that kind of bring your own mentality and bring your own design. So with that quick introduction, let me try to stop my annotation here and move forward to slides. And I do need to clear my annotation. I'm not a master at that yet. So let's do a quick overview of the Glueware applications. And this is a little bit of rehashing from last time, but I think it sets the stage for how you use Glueware in that. Let me stop the annotation. It's taking away my mouse. Okay. So one of the first apps you're going to use in the product is called Dashboards. Dashboards gives you a visualization as to who's on the platform and how many devices and all kinds of other things. Dashboards also can be a point of navigation. If I'm viewing my dashboard on network audits, I can click into a failed audit and see what failed the audit. So dashboards we're going to highlight in this demo today. Next is Device Manager. So this app we highlighted in part 1, which is where you can do a lot of things in Device Manager. And you see all the different logos here, vendors we support, again, over 30 operating systems, where we can inventory the network, we can discover the network, we can interface with Cisco APIs to check things like SmartNet and PCERT and end-of-life, end-of-sale. We can execute on-demand queries called ad hoc queries. And we're saving and indexing the configurations. Then you can search across all your configurations. So there's a lot you can do in Device Manager, just getting started with understanding what is deployed in your network. Then something we're going to demonstrate here in the live session is Config Drift and Audit. Drift is around monitoring the network for change and identifying what changed and then potentially remediating it if you need to. Audit is around if you're an organization that has to follow compliance or governance like PCI DSS or HIPAA or NIST and some of the examples here, or your own configuration policy, you can define audits of required and forbidden commands that Glueware will go and search the entire network and highlight any violations. So we're going to see that in a live demo. Next, an app showcased in part 1. So if you're hearing me reference part 1, you can go back and watch the YouTube recording that's posted of part 1 webinar, where we highlighted Device Manager and OS Manager in terms of OS upgrades. But OS Manager is where you build a plan and we automate the end-to-end process to pre-validate that the device is in good condition, check the file server, check the image, transfer the image, do all the necessary pre-checks and post-checks to ensure your best case without failure of operating system upgrade and patch automation on the network. So the other app we're going to show today in quite a bit of highlight is what we call config modeling. Sometimes we refer to this as our superpower, because what we're doing with configuration and the configuration data for your network is really making that pretty big leap from treating network configurations as text and copying, pasting text files and not treating it programmatic, to actually breaking down a configuration into individual features, wrapping those features in data modeling, which is JSON-based data modeling, and beginning to treat the network infrastructure and the configuration as code. So config modeling enables us to do that, and you're going to see how. And then workflows are more when you're automating end-to-end tasks and processes. So there's numerous good examples of that. And then finally, you tend to get into API integration. So you want to integrate with ServiceNow as an ITSM or Remedy, or maybe you want to integrate with something like Ansible. We have connectors that Ansible can call and trigger things like a audit in Glueware. So with that, let's move on into kind of the big picture view, which is, and I'll attempt to annotate again here. So when you think of, well, what does Glueware automate? Well, we automate all of the things down here at the network layer. So over 30 operating systems in what you would call the CLI-driven infrastructure. So all these all these network operating systems support a CLI interface. Then what's new and what we've been expanding on rapidly is API-driven infrastructure. So I mentioned Cisco's SD-WAN, Cisco ACI, Cisco Meraki, F5, there's numerous other platforms that are offering an API interface, and Glueware can rapidly onboard APIs to then automate the network layer. And announced in December of last year with Glueware 4.0, we onboarded HashiCorp's Terraform, and through it, we're able to onboard any provider, including Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and we can automate the cloud infrastructure. So that's what we automate. So again, Glueware sits in this kind of layer here called the automation orchestration layer. But when we think about network automation and end-to-end process automation, sometimes you want things in the management plane to be able to make calls to the automation orchestration. For example, if I have an external source of truth like ServiceNow or Netbox is where I first define devices being added to the network, ServiceNow or really any or Netbox or anything can make an API call to Glueware's published API to do things like add devices. Or let's say you have a system or from Glueware, you want to pull an IP address from Infoblox. So that would be a custom integration, and Glueware would pull an AP or pull something else like a piece of code or configuration from get, so this is where Gluware is interacting with the management plane via APIs, and it's done either via our published API or via custom integration that we can do for you or you can do yourself through Gluware Lab. So let's clear all my drawings and kill the annotation. Okay, so now the fun part, let's move on to the demo. Let me stop sharing for a second and switch over to the user interface. So here you see the sign in for Gluware, and I mentioned before, but Gluware is peer software. This happens to be an on-prem system that's deployed in a private network. So you have user credentials. So I'm going to get signed in here. And when you sign into Gluware, it's going to return you to the last place you were in the system. So it bounced me back to our dashboard framework. And this is a quick dashboard I built called the Welcome Dashboard. So it shows me what users are on the system. So it's currently me only. The number of devices. Last time in part 1, we started with 0 devices, and we showed you how we add devices into the system. So you can see there's 23 devices. This is a widget called a bulletin. So it's a full HTML editor, but you can really provide or put anything in here. So I have a couple, system updates and demos. Here we are on June 8th, where I'm recording a webinar. And then you can pull in third-party web applets. Here's links to our knowledge base. I'm going to circle back to that, web pages, and so on. And so this is just one example. I'll navigate over to a dashboard library, and you can see, in this example, our inventory example dashboard, where we're showing you the types of devices or the operating system breakdown, or a grid with some device details, maybe your upcoming activity that's scheduled in the system. And I'll just navigate over to OS management. We executed or showcased how we do operating system upgrades. And you can see, if anything, if there's a failure, and you can see what happened. But basically, the dashboards provide you a lot of operational insight, and then you can navigate in. And we're going to be getting into Drift and Audit, but I can see here the different audits I'm running and any device violations that have been identified. So with that quick intro, I will hop into Device Manager first, just again, in terms of a recap, to show you that these 23 devices have been added into the system, and Gluware has performed a device detect and discovered these devices and pulled a lot of detail out of these devices. And you can click into any one of them and see more detail. And again, with the Cisco API capabilities, I can see if there are any SmartNet contracts or PCerts. And I can look at, this is the SmartNet contract status. And then this over here is the PCert information, if there's any advisories to expose. And so let me actually just jump into one that has some, like this one right here. A lot of these are virtual systems, so there's not a lot of that here. But if I jump into this system, I can see I'm pulling this data from Cisco. We're sending it information about the device through a Cisco API, and I can get the data on things like API from Cisco around a high advisory. And this is important because when you have advisories, usually you're taking a few actions. One of the actions would be to then continually audit the network for that condition. So I could add it to my audit rules. Another example is if there's a config workaround that you need to do, you could implement the config workaround and roll it out through Gluware. And then the most extreme case would be that you have to execute an operating system upgrade. And we showed that before. So I do see there's a question in the chat. Let me quickly look at this. So there's a question in the chat that says, when I get started with automation, what should I do in my first step? Or what is the first step in automation? And so it really kind of follows that stair step we were talking about. What we would advise is basically inventorying your network, understanding what's in the network from a physical device standpoint or virtual device, understanding your network inventory. Once you have the inventory, understand the details about that inventory. So you should be at a uniform or approved operating system version. You should understand if the equipment you have is under a support contract, you know, and if you're supported devices, that's where it ties in nicely with WWS, is if you have NetGuard and you're covering these devices with a you know, a policy. And then once you really understand your network, you start to monitor it for change, implement audits, and then get into configuration management. So with this quick recap of Device Manager, we're going to jump into the first kind of new content here, keep it fun and fresh. We're going to jump into the model editor, and this is where we implement configuration modeling. So to give you some orientation about how we handle or how we implement configuration management, I'll just highlight that in our system is very modular, and in solutions management, we have the ability to load in what we call config modeling kits for the various vendors. So one question we get pretty often is, okay, Glueware, well, how do you deal with, you know, Cisco changing a CLI or semantic, or Cisco changing something? Well, we release updates to our vendor packages frequently, as often as monthly or even more frequently. And that's accounting for the changes and things that we have to address. And so what you'll see here is in this system, I have numerous packages installed. And so if you run into an issue where a vendor changed something, you send us the log. Glueware is able to address that issue and issue an update to the vendor package and quickly get that addressed. So I can see here for some of the ones I'm going to be demonstrating, like Cisco iOS, I am fully up to date with that package. So let's navigate back into the model editor. So the view I have here are, I'm looking at the network devices. And let me just start from this particular network device and show you an example where, because I have a package of features loaded, you want to think about, you have the network devices themselves. Then you have this next construct here. If you're looking at the visualization of our data modeling, we have something called the assembly. The assembly is like a shopping cart where you're saying, what do I want to automate? And in this case, we have a library of features that we preload in the system, for example. So you can automate your banner and DNS and NTP and services and SNMP and Syslog. So these are sets of examples. When you then navigate into each feature, you're going to see examples where, you know, there's an example banner and there's an example DNS configuration, for example, right here. So, and then what you're going to see from our examples is not only is there some static CLI, but you're going to have CLI that starts to incorporate variables. Variables can be defined within our system. We can pull them from external systems. There's numerous ways to handle that. But what we're able to do is abstract variables into form fills like you see here. So let's just say, as a quick example, I want to update my DNS. So maybe there's some problem with our internal DNS that's privately addressed. I want to add an external public DNS. So I'm going to add a server and call it 8.8.8.8. That's a Google well-known DNS server. I hit save. So now I've just made a change to my policy. And it's one change across all these features I'm automating on that's tied to this assembly. And this assembly is assigned to this router. So now I can go and say, well, what if now I want to apply that change down to the network? So I'm going to say provision. And instead of actually just making the change, we have the capability to preview. So I'm going to hit start action, and I'm going to say run a connected preview, proceed. And a connected preview is going to connect to the device like it's going to automate it. And then it's going to tell me what it's going to do, meaning I'm going to read everything you have configured, compare it to your desired state that's defined here, and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do if you commit the change to the network. So with the when you see the log here, Glueware is examining every configured state and it's comparing it to the desired state. And this log has a lot of detail in it. If you really just want to focus on the routing statements or the router's configuration, I can use this CLI view and I can see exactly what's happening on the CLI. And so I can see it finished here. If I look at the processed view, this is what I see. And that if you look at, it's removing the original name server statement, and then it's adding the name servers again with the addition of the new name server. So with Cisco, that's how you would have to do it. And Glueware is intelligent enough to actually, understand I have to remove the command and then add these individually, and that's how it's done. So as well as in the configuration, it's picking up a variable here that changed, SNMP location, and some syslog configuration that went in. So if I'm happy with these changes, I just commit them down to the network. So this is a preview. Now I can go back and I can say, provision the features and hit start, proceed. So this is our approach, and we call it configuration modeling or config modeling, because as we deconstruct, if you're on a Cisco router or any vendor and you do a show run or show run all, you get just a block of human readable text. And a lot of network engineers treat that as text. What Glueware is doing, and again, let me bring up this example of like this domain name server. If you click on the JSON view, we're actually, for every config item, everything we're managing, we wrap in a data model. So this is the JSON-based data modeling that encompasses the CLI command, but also variables, and we have the ability to point to variables to handle that. So that's, so let's jump back to the provisioning of this guy. I'll just show you that I completed. If I jump back here, and I can see that it is finishing, and you have another view, especially when you're automating a lot of features. You can scroll over on your grid and it's going to cycle through and tell you exactly which feature it's automating. And now it's executed fully provisioned. So when I automate, and so I'm automating 7 features on this device, and you can see all of these features have been automated. 2 more things to touch on in the model editor before we move on. One is that if I jump back to my assembly, in addition to automating features like, again, DNS and NTP and Syslog, I can tie in a state assessment. So if you think about what Glueware is doing here, you're saying, this is my desired config, read the device, compare it to the desired state, and then make it so. But what about the operational state? Are my BGP peers up? Is my NTP server in a synchronized status? This is where we can insert state assessment. We can insert it to do it on demand, more in a troubleshooting or pre-check mode, or when it's performing a provisioning, and we can do something with that. So let's tie in a state assessment. I'm going to check NTP policy. I'm going to hit save. So what I'm going to do is quickly show you what we're doing with this policy. So I've tied a policy here, and the policy can be made up of multiple checks. So if I had 6 or 10 different protocols running, I could check each protocol. In this case, I'm going to just do a single check for demonstration purposes. But what I'm doing is Glueware is going to execute the command show NTP status and look at each server. And then it's going to look at the servers, and so it's going to pull and then format that. So it's going to pull that human readable CLI and make it programmatic, right, in a data model. Now, then I'm going to apply a query to that data, and I'm querying for the NTP state to be synchronized. So let's go ahead and check that. So I'm on this router, and I say, okay, I want to run a state assessment on demand, and hit start action and hit proceed. And then I'll jump to the log so you can see it in action here. So as it's executing all the standard pre-checks that Glueware does, but what I want to show you what happened in this log is Glueware executed a query to look at the state assessment. And then it assessed that the query was, for each of the queries, it was successful. So that is, again, where we wrap in pre-checks, post-checks, and even checking operational state when executing changes. So now let's get on to maybe the most exciting part of the demo, which is, wow, I'm used to configuring the device. I don't know how to build all this. This looks complicated. So let's just go and show you how simple it can be. So I'm going to clear automation off this device, meaning I'm going to take this device Glueware is working on, and I have no automation policy tied to it. So let's just say this is a device in your lab or in your network, and this is like my ideal branch router. We have the ability to right click and perform a model discovery where we are going to query this device using the knowledge we have about all of these features. We're going to query it, understand all the features that are configured, and understand the policies tied to that. So we're going to look at how Banner is configured and how DNS is configured, and so on and so forth. So we're executing this model discovery where we're going to interrogate this device. And so in device discovery, we're looking at the device details. What kind of router, what serial number, what operating system. Now we're interrogating the configuration state and the config policy. So as it interrogates this, you see it run through it. And ultimately, we're building the model, a model of automation to then apply to other devices. So because this device has quite a bit configured on it, it does take a little bit of time to execute that discovery, and it's going to dynamically build the models. So as I look through the log here, I can see it's discovering DNS and looking for DMVPN, looking at NetFlow, looking at NTP, QoS. So it's performing this in-depth discovery, and then it shows me what it discovered. So it discovered AAA and all of these commands. It discovered Banner and these commands. It looked for DMVPN, but it wasn't configured. It looked for DNS. So on and so forth. You can see that all of this was discovered. If I hit next, now let's say I want to just automate some globals here. I'm going to just look through this. I'm going to turn off a few of these because I just want to, let's just say I want to make these my standard globals, AAA, Banner, DNS, NTP. I'll turn off QoS for simplicity, SNMP, and Syslog. And I hit OK, and I hit finish. So before, when I first started in config modeling, I started with a map that was already built. And I said, it's an example, and it's built from features in our library, meaning we're going to give you a library, and we're going to show you, you teach you how to use it, and you can make it your own. Now we connected to a device, and instead of using something pre-built, we've just built this automation policy from scratch. So we built the assembly, and I chose these features that I wanted to create: AAA, Banner, DNS, NTP, Syslog. So now when I look at these constructs, when I look at the actual policy, here you go. These are the DNS servers, right? If I look at NTP, this is the NTP server I'm configuring. So now I've created a kind of a golden copy from this device, and this is the assembly name. So now let's say I want to take this configuration, and let me order these by now. Let's say I want to take these other branch routers that have nothing automated on them. I want to do a multi-select and a multi-edit. And I'm going to assign that automation policy. Let me just find it. So that policy was just created. Hit save. So now all of these other routers are going to get that same policy. And again, with them multiple selected there. Now I'm going to take these guys, which I haven't done anything on. I just read everything off the CSR 152. I'm going to take that policy and send it to CSR 153, 54, and 55, hit start action, and whoop, that's not the action I wanted. I want to do a provisioning and hit, I'm just going to make it, I can preview it. Let's just preview it, maybe a little faster, start action, and hit proceed. So no matter what configuration state these guys are in for that, if it's missing the figure, if it's missing these features, those features will be configured. If they're configured incorrectly, it'll fix them. And if it has the wrong things that are not in policy, it will remove them. So this is an automation term we call idempotent, where Glueware will look at what is configured, and then it will, all of them will end up in the same desired state. So as I scroll over to my grid, kind of maybe an easier way to watch Glueware automate all of, actually I'm previewing. So, let's see, CSR. Let me see my summary here. I didn't execute it. Start, do a connected preview. And so now it's going to execute that. So this is really quite powerful. This is called intelligent model discovery, the ability to discover the configured features and policy, build the automation from it, reading from one device, being able to take that kind of copy and then be able to automate it to others. And so this is a nice kind of, I don't call it low-hanging fruit, but when you're getting started with automation, one of the things you want to look at doing is unifying your global policy. So, so with that, and again, we spent a lot of time on config modeling, but it's a really important feature. Let's move on to Drift and Audit. So let's take a look at the Drift and Audit app. So when I navigate into Config Drift and Audit, I have my list of devices. And so I'm going to select all my devices. And what you see, a key column here is called captured status. And what you're seeing here with these two interleaved circles is there's no drift. I can see that I was making changes on a device and that change was flagged. So one of the things with drift is Glueware has the option of turning on Syslog Integration. When you turn on Syslog Integration, it will notify Glueware that a change has been made. So if I double click on it and I look at the change that was made, remember we added this 8.8.8.8. We had also made a change to, previously made a change to UDP. And this is pulling in a variable of the device that was changed. And so this is showing you exactly what has changed in that last provisioning. So let's just say I'm happy with all that. I can hit star and say, great, that's now my golden copy, right? So that's now my good copy and everything is fine. So let's make an unauthorized change. So let me just jump back over to Device Manager. And sorry, actually, I'm going to go to the model editor. Through the model editor, we have the ability to open up a terminal window. So I'm going to jump on that router 152 and open up the terminal window and say connect. And as it logs in here, so I'm going to emulate a user, like an ops user, that's working a ticket or an issue, and it's just trying to jump in and make a change. So I go into config mode, and I say IP name server, and I'm going to add 4.4.4.4. Let's say I wanted to back up from my 8.8.8.8. So I add that, and then I'm going to say NTP server, and I'm going to say 1.1.1.1. Okay, so I just logged into this device and made what would be considered an unauthorized change. Okay, so now let's navigate back over to Drift and Audit. So here in Drift and Audit, I see something happening, right? On CSR 152, it's performing another drift. Now, I didn't trigger the drift, but the drift was triggered by Syslog, and someone logged in with the credential Cisco, which I just did, And I can see that here. So if I double click on this guy again, and let me close out my previous. So let's take a look at that comparison. And what did I just do? I just added that 4.4.4.4, and I added an NTP server, right? So you can see that, and again, I'm trying to, kind of speed up time a little bit, but with Config Drift, what our customers usually do is turn on a scheduled capture, like let's say within every 24-hour period, and you're going to see exactly what changed. So one mechanism for capturing the drift is a scheduled capture. The other mechanism is in the system turning on Syslog and then enabling the device themselves or some other Syslog system in your environment to forward Syslog server messages to Gluware. And with the Syslog notification, it's coming from the device that someone went into config T and is going to made a change. And this works across, pretty much all the vendors. So you can see here that worked well. And that's what Drift is about getting ahead of the changes and understanding what is, if someone can't reach a server or, someone is having problems with connectivity, you want to understand where there are changes on the network, and Drift can show you that. So the final part of the demonstration, I'm going to switch over to my Audit Policy Explorer. And in this system, we've preloaded some audits. And one thing I will quickly highlight is that from the Gluware knowledge base, we have example audits, we have example feature packages. So you can come in here and grab these, you download them, and then in the Gluware system, you just say, I want to import a policy, and then you drop in that JSON-based policy, and then the policy is in your system. Let's take a look at a policy and what it looks like. So this particular example policy is built from the DoD Security Technical Implementation Guide, or STIG, which is saying these are recommendations for this one that happens to be for Cisco iOS 16.3, I believe, or 4. It's a lot of. Anyway, it's a reference standard to enable and disable specific features on a Cisco device for security. So this one says require inbound access list. This one says I forbid these services to be enabled. So this rule says turn off your HTTP services. And it goes on and on. So what you see here are very simple audit policies made up of vendor CLI with regex, right? To take care of things like I may have different IP addresses here. And it's a very simple ability to build these policies. Any network engineer can do this. You do not have to be a programmer or learn any programming languages. A little bit of regex does help, certainly, in terms of dealing with variables. And so that's what your policy looks like. And now let me go back to my view of my devices, and let me arrange by operating system and take these iOS-based devices. So I selected these guys, and I'm going to say execute and audit. And I can do this on demand or scheduled. Here, I'm going to run an on-demand audit. I'm going to run that DoD policy and hit start audit. And you can see it runs very quickly because all of the configurations are already in the Gluware system from the last time you snapshotted the configuration. So we don't have to go out and query the network unless you want to. So what I can see here is there's 7 devices total, and each of the 7 had violations for a total of 42. So if I view my results here, I see there was consistency, meaning in parentheses 6 errors per device. So if I expand this CSR 152, so the VTY, this configuration on my virtual terminal lines is not configured. I don't have inbound access lists. I didn't turn on output SSH. So you can see here, there are rules that in my example configuration, I'm not compliant. I didn't follow all the guidelines here. So this is a very quick look at config audit, in that when you have an audit and you have, let's just say there was something in here that you were automating. that you could, remediate, right? Just like, either you have an audit that takes you out of policy, or as I showed, drift took me out of policy. So how do we remediate? Well, back in the model editor, and I'll just use the example here where instead of using these policies, I'm going to change my feature back to my global standards. So I had a policy called global features. This is the one I started with. And so here's my global features. And so now I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, and you can do this again through Glueware, or you can trigger this through an API call, a couple different ways to do it. And again, just for the sake, well, let's just go ahead and provision. So start the action, proceed. And you're going to see, we're going to execute a provisioning here. Again, for simplicity, sometimes I like to look at the CLI view, and you can see Glueware is looking at show run, show boot. It's looking at numerous things. Every time Glueware talks to a device, it interrogates it to look at information to understand, especially if you have any constraints in. So coming back to that other question, how does Glueware keep up with vendors as they're changing operating system? One of the things you can do is, if I've built my automation policy and it's built for a specific release of a vendor like Cisco iOS, I can put a constraint in that says, check to make sure this device is running this version. So if it is running the version, it will automate it. If it's not running that version, it will error out on the pre-check and tell you, this device didn't meet the constraint. And so while this is running, I'll actually hit the chat for a few other questions here. It looks like addressed the questions that were there. So the provisioning finished. And so let's just jump back to Drift and Audit, because the whole purpose of kind of the jump back and forth was show remediation. So now if and my configuration triggered, again, because we have Syslog enabled, it's triggering a new capture. And so now I can see that CSR 152 was remediated. And if I double click on it, it's saying it's unchanged, meaning it has been taken back to the standard specification. One other quick thing to highlight is that Glueware is saving all of those configurations. So every time it's performing a capture, that's going to be captured in the system and available for you. So let me jump back into the chat here. Looks like there may be a question. Okay, so the question is, how do we work with both Glueware and WWOS on automation? What's the best way to start? And we're going to show you that at the end. There's a good call to action that we can tell you how to get started. So with that concluding the demo, I'll stop share and bring up the slides again. And here we go. Share. And let me jump back to the WWS portion. And Ken, let me hand it over to you to highlight. Let me get to. Apologize.
Yeah.
Ken. Yep.
Yeah. So hey, thanks for doing that, Mike. That was great. That was a great demonstration. Everything we learned a lot there for that. So that's great. This kind of also. So my slides here will kind of answer that question. How do you work with Glueware and WWS together? Well, let me just kind of point this out. The first line, the discovery of the network devices. One of Glueware's features is it helps you tell you what you have, where you have it. Do you have gaps? Do you need maintenance solution? Do you have end of life products or end of sale products? And that's where the software meets the hardware world. So as Glueware is working on the software and doing all the provisioning and all that stuff that Mike just showed you, when it comes to, hey, I need to fill these gaps, I need to buy some hardware. Okay, we can help you with that. Hey, I see a lot of end of life and end of support stuff coming up. Okay, we can provide you a non-OEM maintenance support program that fits within your budget. And then the last thing is Glueware just discovered that there's a ton of surplus equipment out here that I didn't even know. What am I going to do with it? Well, give it back to Worldwide Services and they can sell it off to one of their many customers. So it's a unique partnership where we complement each other. to find out what's in your network, and then where do we go with it. So that's kind of the first slide. Mike, you want to hit the next one? So let me just get into a couple of details. So supplying the gaps, we offer all the different OEMs. I mean, I know Cisco was mentioned a lot, but there's a lot of different things that the Glueware software will discover for you. And it could be the various different OEMs that we have up here. Don't worry, we can help with this equipment too. And it comes with a lifetime warranty. So if you're looking for some equipment, please give us an opportunity. Next one, Mike. This is NetGuard. This is when I'm talking about the end of life, end of service. You know, what do we do with that equipment when the OEM wants to move off it and asks you to refresh or get newer equipment, and you want to keep the equipment in your network? You basically want to extend the life of your network by keeping it in there, but by not using the OEM's very expensive warranty, or I'm sorry, maintenance solution. That's when NetGuard comes in, and it's a very simple program, and will provide instant savings. All right, the next one, Mike. Again, this is just talking about the cash flow, reducing your reoccurring maintenance costs. That's all what NetGuard is about. It's basically the same program you're going to get from the OEM, but you don't need all the firmware updates. You don't need all the licensing. You don't need all the software updates. Those have already passed at this point when we're looking at the network, when we're involved. So. Next one. This is just a success story, and we have lots of these that we can share. And when we get on a one-on-one conversation, we can explain this to you. But basically, there was a hospital, and their concern was end of life, right? All the equipment was going end of life, and they really didn't want to make the investment. They didn't want to refresh. Hospitals are trying to save money, but keep up with demand. So the solution was to partake in our NetGuard solution. And what it did was save them $5 million over multiple years, and extended the life of their network and just kept it going for a hospital there. But this case study plugs into many different scenarios. So Mike, I'll turn it back over to you on this one.
Yeah, so thanks, Ken. That's great. Okay. And again, I see tremendous value in the NetGuard support contract. And as you mentioned, and probably address one of the questions that came up is, you know, what vendors do Glueware support, and does it align with the NetGuard? And, you know, there's a lot of overlap, as Ken mentioned. Glueware is at 30 operating systems. The other thing to mention is that, you know, Glueware is focused on automating enterprise networks. We have not been as focused on the cable modem space or cable space, as well as the service provider space. So you're going to see some differences because NetGuard isn't like really only an enterprise offering. And certainly NetGuard can be for things in the cable modem space and service provider space. So there is a little bit of difference. But what I would add is Glueware adds vendor support very quickly. We can implement the changes to support a new vendor in the area of 2 days, and we can usually deliver initial vendor support in less than 2 weeks when it's a top priority. So nearly every release of Glueware, we're adding in multiple new vendor operating systems, but being at 30, we're at most of the one covered that we get asked for frequently. So with that, let's talk about, you know, the other question is, how do you get started and how can Glueware and WWS work together? So the offer we have here is a bundle which is going to help you assess your network. And this is executed on our Glueware Pro free platform, or Glueware Pro platform, which is again run out of Amazon Web Services. So the beauty of that is Glueware takes care of all the administrative capabilities, meaning we set up the software, the licensing, the users, everything. You literally just sign in with your credentials and you're ready to go. The only piece that you need to take care of is installing a lightweight piece of software on your prem called the Glueware Secure Gateway to enable that two-way communication to leverage and interrogate the network devices. Once you're up and running, we've taken the guardrails off. Usually our free offer is only for 100 devices. Through our partnership with WWS for 30 days, you get Glueware for the full supported up to 2,000 devices on Glueware Pro. So up to 2,000 devices, you get the Device Manager app, the Config Drift and Audit app. With Device Manager, again, it's going to give you network discovery, network inventory, the ability to query your network. You can hook in those Cisco API, which are important when you're looking at the integration with, or looking at NetGuard, with the combination of your inventory data along with end of life, end of sale, and your current SmartNet coverage to try to figure out what you need coverage on in NetGuard. So that's why it's a very complementary offering. Then you also get that Config Drift and Audit app. So again, Drift enables you to see the changes on your network. Audit tells you if you're in or out of policy and you're executing these on a regular basis. And the folks from WWS are going to help you out along with our Glueware support team. So you're going to be fully supported and execute this for 30 days. And you're going to have a lot of insight that you then can decide what your next steps are. You're going to have you'll get a business case from WWS to understand the benefits of NetGuard. And with Glueware, we'll help to give you an ROI to say what you can in turn do with Glueware in terms of ongoing automation. If you're hearing all this and you're saying, well, 2,000 nodes is small, or that's not, our network is much bigger, we do have the Glueware enterprise offering. So if it's a case where you're not the right fit for Glueware Pro, we do have Glueware Enterprise that can be installed on-prem. We just need to meet with you and understand your requirements, and we can help facilitate an on-prem evaluation also enabled through Glueware Enterprise. So I think that takes us to the end here. Ken, any final comments on the offering?
Nope, I think that's great. Hopefully a lot of you guys will come kick the tires with us and see what we can do. And we'd love to earn your business.
Thanks. So in terms of a final slide, you can go to both our websites on the WW Services page and request a consultation. On the glueware.com page, you can request a demo or sign up for a test drive where we spin up a virtual system and allow you to kind of kick the tires and play with the software, led through some video tutorials. So with that, we'll conclude the webinar. But again, thank you for your time and your interest in worldwide services and Glueware. And we look forward to helping you out in your automation journey here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Stop.